As we come to the end of Genesis, we're coming to the end of Jacob's life. The father of the fathers of the church, as John Calvin would say. He's already adopted as his grandsons Ephraim and Manasseh. And he's also given a double portion of the firstborn privilege to the younger Ephraim. And now he's giving a parting blessing to the rest of his sons. This passage is one of the longest kind of poetic blessings in Genesis. Nothing really kind of comes close. It's poetic because we can see that there's parallelisms and puns. Those are kind of some of the big features that we see with Hebrew. A parallelism is just two lines that kind of say the same thing or they contrast something. We see it there at the beginning. Come, you sons of Jacob. Hear, you sons of Jacob. Listen to your father. It's the same thing. It's repeated. This is all throughout the Bible. And then there's comparison to animals, and there's plays on the words of some of his sons, for example. So Yehuda means to praise, and he says your brothers will praise you. And so it's Yehuda, Yahuduka. Yehuda, Yahuduka, your brothers will praise you. So it's kind of these funny play on words that he's doing throughout. And then there's all these comparison to animals. So it's very poetic. It's also very challenging. There's a lot of words in there that only appear once in biblical studies. These are called hapax legomena, once sayings. And if they only appear once, sometimes you don't have ways to define what they are. So often the way that we understand a word is we understand what it is through its context. And we look at it in the Bible, and then if it's not in the Bible, like some of these words, we have to go look in other languages or other places. And this has a lot of words like that. And so this consequently is one of the most commented on passages of the Bible. I know I've said this with several moments with the Genesis story, but this is probably one of the apexes of the end of Genesis. It's commented on a lot, and then there's a lot of disagreement on. You can take these interpretations in all kinds of different ways. I'm not going to be going through all the different interpretations. I'm going to try to be brief, tell you what I think it is, and move on. The order of the blessings, it's not in strict birth order either. It's more in alignment with the wives and the concubines. It's more how it's ordered. You kind of have, you have Leah and her sons, and then you have essentially, you have Rachel's concubine, I think it's Bilhah. Her sons are then, think of, if we're listing it from top to bottom, you have Leah's sons, and then you have Rachel's concubines, like here and here, and then you have Leah's concubines right in the middle, and then it's all of Rachel's sons at the very end. That's how it's structured. So it's generally in birth order, but not entirely. For example, Leah's first 4 sons are listed in birth order, but the 2 later sons she has are placed with the younger preceding the older. And perhaps this is, Zebulun is placed before Issachar. And perhaps this is just more of the younger supplanting the older motif throughout. And then with the concubines, there may be a chiastic structure with the way that ignore that for a second, ignore the handout. It's actually more confusing with what I want to say here. With Rachel's concubines being bracketed on the top and the bottom, and then Leah's being in the middle, what's being highlighted? If we take that as a chiastic structure, what's more important in that structure? Do you remember how a chiasm works?
Whatever's in the middle.
Right, so what's in the middle here? Nope, don't look at that. It's the children of the concubine of Leah. So it's throughout it, it looks like he's privileging Leah. And that's a good thing because he doesn't naturally love Leah. So anyway, does that make sense? Okay.
I don't know what you mean by Rachel's concubines and Leah's concubines. Aren't they all Jacob's concubines?
That's right. I should say handmaiden. They're the
Servants of those.
slaves. Yeah, whatever. Slaves, handmaiden. It's all the same thing. But you're right. That was a poor choice of words. And then lastly, I'm kind of going over some of the structural things here, and then we'll move on and dive further into it. But we have this interjection, and there's a lot of debate over what it is. It comes right after Dan. It's in between Dan and Gad. It's just this brief prayer where he says, I have waited for your salvation, O Lord. Like, it doesn't seem to be connected to the blessings. It just, at first gloss, it just seems randomly thrown in there. Why is it in there? Why is it there after Dan and before Gad? It seems random. And that's why I printed this out for you. I think that this is, I'm not saying this is infallible, but I think this is helpful. I think there's probably something going on here. James Jordan has suggested this. And I guess just as a refresher, Melissa, you got this right. But chiasms are all throughout the Bible. It's a way of structuring. It's a way of highlighting just through the way you organize something. And basically, when it's organized in this way, each of these sons or positions in the chiasm, they say something about each other, or they contrast with each other. And then the most important, or the point it centers, is the center here. And so the chiasm is, the centerpiece of this chiasm is what?
I have waited for your salvation, O Lord.
So what's the most important thing that's being said here?
I have waited for your salvation.
Right, you're waiting on a Messiah. And that's what I think Jacob is saying. A lot of these blessings are kind of intermingled with some bad stuff. So he knows his sons are not going to be all that great. They're going to need a Messiah. I've waited for your salvation, O Lord. So you can take a look at these. We could even, there is a sense in which we could even back up Joseph and Benjamin to Reuben and Levi and Simeon. Because the kingly blessing doesn't actually go to Joseph and Benjamin. It goes to Judah. And so they didn't lose it out of anything that they had done. It just doesn't go to them. It goes to Judah. Where Reuben and Levi, you see how it's like loss of privilege? You could put loss of privilege next to Joseph and Benjamin as well, even though they didn't do anything to lose it. And then... But yeah, you see that comparison, the kingly stuff with Judah. Benjamin's compared to a wolf. A wolf doesn't necessarily have to be bad. I think it generally is bad, but a wolf can be good too. Just like a lion sometimes Satan is described as a lion. Well, that's not good, but God is also described as a lion. Same thing with a wolf, and Benjamin is wolfly in that kind of, he goes and gets his prey in the morning and, all that stuff. So anyway, this is, and then I would say that this idea of the serpent attacking with Dan and then Gad triumphing over the attacker is a fitting end for the end of Genesis. What does the proto-evangelion say? What is the proto-evangelion? Anyone? Bueller?
The heel of the
Right.
lion crushes the head of the serpent.
That's right. That's right. And what is that?
Christ.
Right. So right there at the beginning of Genesis, we have this war between, we have God saying the serpent's going to attack, but I'm going to crush the head of the serpent. And right there, Dan is a serpent who attacks. Gad triumphs over the attacker. What's nestled in between it? The waiting on the Messiah. I don't want to dwell on this too much, but anyway, that's, any questions on that? Thoughts? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. We're not going to go through the whole thing. We're just going to go through the first four sons and hopefully just make it more manageable. Otherwise, we'd be here for a while. All right, so Jacob calls his sons to assembly. It's almost kind of like a call to worship, to hear the word of God, to hear prophecy. You read the early fathers; Jacob is prophesying. Heaven is speaking through him right now. He says, "Let me tell you what will happen in the last days." Now, this term "last days," there's kind of certain. We are accustomed to think of the last days as what? We, not the dispensational evangelical world, but what do we think of the last days generally as?
Judgment.
Okay, so last days could be final judgment. Is that what you mean? Christ coming back in final judgment?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, okay. What else?
Like 70, 80.
Right, okay, yeah. So the coming of Christ and judgment on Jerusalem in the first century. That's generally how last days is used often in the Bible, but not always. And sometimes it's used as the final judgment. Here, I don't think it has really any of those things in mind. It does reach forward to Christ, but it also envisions things as early as the Exodus. So really, last days is just what's going to happen after I'm gone. So it's not really in a technical sense, from Exodus to the coming of Christ. All right.
So it's the end of an era.
You could describe it as an end of an era, maybe. What era would be ending here? Because he says what's going to happen in the last days. There's multiple eras there. You have the Exodus, you have the Judges, you have the Kings, you have the captivity, you have the return, and then you have Christ. So, I mean, that's like 6 eras. If he says, let me tell you what's going to happen in the last days, and then he covers stuff from the Exodus to the coming of Christ. So maybe the Old Covenant era.
The patriarchs.
But the stuff he prophesies don't happen in the patriarchal period generally is Abraham through Jacob.
Right.
That is coming to an end. But what does he say? Do you see the point I'm making here? He says, "Let me tell you what shall befall you in the last days," not the last days are coming to an end. I still take your point that it can be the end of an era, but anyway, I'm just saying there's different senses in which last days are used in the Bible. All right, gather together and hear, you sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel your father. Again, parallelism. Hear, listen, sons, your father. And then he starts talking about Reuben. You're my firstborn, the might and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity. He goes on, unstable as water. So he starts by talking about Reuben's status and his privilege as firstborn. He is Jacob's might, the beginning of his strength. He has excellence and dignity of power. And then he starts transitioning, and this is debated, unstable as water. Sometimes people think that it means like boiling up or bubbling up like water, which nestles in with the first things. You have strength and excellency, kind of think of a bubbling pot. There's something kind of vivacious about that. It's not necessarily bad. But maybe it's ambiguous on purpose because he does talk about you're not going to excel or exceed, and instability is something that's not good, and it's used often of things that are bad. And why? Why does he not excel? Why is his firstborn status taken away from him?
He attacked Shechem.
That's mainly Levi and Simeon, but what does he say in the text?
You sleep with the concubine.
Right. He slept with Bilhah, which is Rachel's handmaiden or slave. And this was likely an attempted coup. This is what we see when Absalom tries to take over the kingdom. He sleeps with his father's concubines. Rachel just dies. Everyone knows that Rachel is the favorite wife. And so Reuben goes, I'm going to sleep with her concubine because she's probably going to be elevated to status, and I'm going to become the patriarch. Which again is just Adam. This is the sin of Adam being repeated. I'm going to be like God. So he lost that. And he may not have spoken about this. This may be the first time he's bringing it up, because he's speaking to Reuben, and then he turns and he says, he went up to my couch. It's almost as if he's turning to the rest of his sons and telling them what he did, why he lost the status. But Reuben's not disinherited. He doesn't lose his inheritance. He just loses his birthright for his sin, like Adam, like a first son, like so many of the older brothers in Genesis. Like he's still in the family, I guess is a better way to say it. Reuben shall not excel, and indeed he did not. From the line of Reuben, there doesn't come any prophets, there's no judges, there's no kings, there's nothing like that, no priests. So we don't see that. We do see that Reuben is the standard bearer when Israel is set up in the camps. I think you have Dan, Judah, Reuben. I can't remember the north one, but yeah. Also, Dathan and Abiram, they come from Reuben. And does anybody know what they did? These are notable people from Reuben. They joined Korah in their rebellion against Moses. Many of the early fathers view these prophecies of Reuben as anticipating the Pharisees or the false teachers of the New Covenant. They see all these things coming to its fullest fruition in the first century. St. Paul and St. James describe immature believers who doubt or give in to sin as being unstable like water, which is how Reuben is described. You're unstable like water. Or sometimes they'll describe them as tossed about by waves. St. Jude describes false teachers and apostates as raging waves of the sea and clouds without water carried about by wind. So there's instability, there's emptiness and instability there. And we've seen this. We've seen young men who are very unstable. And we see how they don't excel. They don't do anything. They can't accomplish anything because they can't fix themselves long enough to do anything. And so in some ways, you can view that as a kind of a curse. It's a kind of it's a way in which you hamstring yourself. And so that stability, we've talked about that. Early on in Trump's presidency, I can't even remember what it was, but there was something happened, and the media was asking him about it. And the media want instability, they want craziness. And I can't remember what Trump said, but he's self-aware enough to know. He's like, I'm just like a giant ship. I just keep going, and everybody ping, ping, ping. They're just shooting at me, and I just keep going. I'm just a steady ship. Like he's self-aware enough to know that he's just this steady ship. And so these things contrasted with each other are important for us to recognize. Matthew Henry says, instability is the ruin of men's excellency. Men do not thrive because they do not fix. And speaking of Reuben, his honor consequently was unstable. It departed from him, vanished into smoke, and became as water spilt upon the ground. That's another way you could translate it. You look at these, you can translate this all kinds of ways. So many things in here that can be translated. So unstable as water can be like water spilt upon the ground. Okay, let's move on to Simeon and Levi. For Simeon and Levi, Jacob recalls Shechem, where there was these conversion of the Shechemites. They wanted to be part of the covenant people. And when they were recuperating from their circumcision, they came in, they slaughtered everybody. And so he talks about this. This is treacherous deception against their covenant brothers. They slew the Shechemites in their anger with their instruments of violence. And Jacob is strongly distancing himself from this kind of conspiratorial violence. The treacherous are in the bottom circle of hell in Dante's Inferno. And anybody who has been dealt with treacherously knows how terrible that feels. But that's what they did here. They were treacherous, they were violent, and he says, I'm not going to be part of this. Levi means attached. Leah has Levi, and she said, maybe my husband will be attached to me now. And Jacob says, I will not be attached to your anger. I will not be in your assembly, to your violent assembly. He doesn't curse them, their person, but he does curse their fierce anger and cruel wrath. So in the sense, we might see that as a blessing. You have cruel anger and cruel wrath, and to have it cursed, it's not necessarily a bad thing. At the end of all this, it says that Jacob blesses his sons. So we have to kind of work through how these curses can be blessings. And that might be a way in which it is a blessing. And later, we see that the Levitical fierce violence is redeemed or channeled into godly ways. Instead of killing innocent brothers, covenant brothers at Shechem, they kill guilty covenant brothers, where? At Sinai. Moses, a Levite, then calls people to join him and God against their idolatrous brothers, sons, and neighbors. What's happening at Sinai? How are they idolatrous? They're worshiping the golden calf. And then Moses calls them to do what? To kill every idolater. How many idolaters are killed at Sinai? The Levites go through and they kill how many idolaters? 3,000. How many people are converted at Pentecost? 3,000. So we have the sword of the Levites, their fierce anger being channeled into something that's good. It's still lesser than, because it's old covenant, but they're turning it against guilty brothers. And then in the new covenant, we see this conversion happen on a spiritual level, or this slaying by the Spirit on a spiritual level. So they're given the dignity of the old covenant priesthood. Paul talks about these kinds of things are honorable. And it's almost as if God is like, okay, you have this fierce anger and wrath, you're going to be soaked in blood for the next 1,500 years. And that's what happened. Phineas is a Levite. He's the grandson of Aaron, I think. Maybe the son, I'm not sure actually. But he slays Zimri and a Midianite woman. Where? Where does Phineas do this?
The place of worship.
At Peor. But yeah, they're binding themselves to Baals and Midianites, and they're doing this through kind of covenantal fornication. And Phineas, a Levite, comes in and he kills his brother, Zimri. And what tribe is Zimri from? He's from Simeon. So Levi and Simeon are brothers, and we see Levi killing Simeon later on when he's being unfaithful. So instead of conspiring together to do unjust violence, he is following God, conspiring with God to do just violence to his brother. And then in the New Covenant, we're never told that St. Peter comes from the tribe of Simeon, but his name is Simeon, Shimeon. And he has kind of a fierce anger moment when? I mean, maybe several times, but when they come to arrest him, he cuts off the ear of Malchus, the assistant to the priest. And he says, no, we're not going to do that. And then Jacob says that he's going to disperse Simeon and Levi and Israel. He will divide them. And this is done in two ways. So he divides them in that they're not next to each other. They're not, so they're divided in that way. Simeon and Levi aren't two tribes nestled next to each other like maybe some of these other ones are. The other way is the Levites, they don't get land. They're just dispersed entirely throughout Israel. And then Simeon is like pocketed right in with Judah all around him. Almost as if like Simeon can't play with any of the other brothers because he can't handle it. Judah's got to keep him in line. And then in the New Covenant, it's kind of the point I was making earlier with Babylon. There's this scattering that happens with the new covenant Simeon, Peter, by sending him out. That's a more purposeful scattering, but there, and then we see a wicked scattering when the shepherd is taken down, when Christ is arrested, all the apostles scatter. And then Christ redeems them, and then he scatters them in the Great Commission. Preach the gospel. And then Barnabas was a Levite. In the new covenant, he sells his land, he brings it to the apostles. And of course, Levi means attached, and then Barnabas famously unattaches himself from St. Paul. So that's something interesting. But they're able to do it, I think, somewhat charitably. They're not able to work together, but it doesn't seem like there's bad blood. All right, lastly, Judah. Jacob turns to Judah. He goes, remember, Judah, Judah is the arrival of contentment, at least temporary contentment for Leah. She's having all these sons. Reuben means see a son, like to her husband. See a son. Don't you love me now? Mm-hmm. That's what Reuben means. Simeon, Shema, means God has heard me. Shimeon, Shema. What's the Shema? Deuteronomy 6. Hear, O Israel. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. Shema, Shimeon. Levi, perhaps my husband will be attached to me now. And then Judah, Yehuda, I will praise God. So she realized that God is the one that can fill that contentment, or at least if we read between the lines, I think that's probably, we understand human nature. We understand that God fills us with, he is the one, everybody's looking for love. And most people, even married people, don't find it with other people. They're not able to give it to them. And God gives it. God is able to satisfy. That's what we're created for. And so she praises God and finds contentment, and this is where Judah comes from. She does have two other sons later on after she tries to have, she has two sons with her handmaiden, and then she has two sons later on. But Jacob begins by pronouncing a prophecy of Judah's brothers, praising Judah and bowing to him. So what was once prophesied about who is now given to Judah?
Joseph.
Right. Your brothers will bow down to you, Joseph. But now Jacob, and this is significant because Jacob didn't love Leah. He didn't even like his own sons. You could kind of, I mean, that may be stating it too boldly. But you know that he loves Benjamin and Joseph. You know that he loves Rachel, and he's likely suspicious of his own sons, perhaps of even killing, when they got rid of Joseph. We don't know, but there's animosity there. There's history there. But he says, your brothers are going to bow down to you, So that's quite remarkable. I think it testifies to Jacob speaking through the Spirit here. He says your hand will be on the neck of your enemies, which just means that he's going to be victorious over his enemies. There's going to be complete victory over them. And there's kind of a dual, with all of these prophecies, there's a dual fulfillment. What are the two major fulfillments here? Victory over your enemies, Judah. Where do we see this happening? The descendant of Judah has complete victory over his enemies.
Jesus.
David, exactly. Right. You read 1 Chronicles 18, and it just gives a long list, or I'm reading through 2 Samuel, just a long list of all the enemies that David had conquered, God had given to him. And then, of course, the second fulfillment is, or its ultimate fulfillment is in Jesus, where Jesus conquers wherever he goes. And he will continue to conquer until his final judgment. Okay, and then he's compared to a lion, which of course signifies royalty. The early fathers generally understood Judah as a lion's whelp to be a prophecy of Christ as an infant. There's an indication that the Messiah there's going to be something significant about his infancy, being born. But he's coming up from prey also is part of the prophecy that indicates that he's dangerous. So he's a lion's whelp, but he comes up from prey. So he's an infant, but he's also going to be dangerous to his enemies. And we see this right away. We see Herod is terrified of this infant, and judgment does come. St. John in his Apocalypse describes Christ as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And of course, in Revelation, at least the way that I take it, Christ is making war on his enemies. And you could take that, I think principally it's preteristic, it's first century. I think you could take it idealistically as well, where it's just a picture of good versus evil that we see being repeated over and over in church history. And then, of course, it'll happen at the end of time as well. He devours his enemies like a lion. And then we have this statement of the lion bowing down. He bows down. He lies down like a lion. And as a lion, who shall rouse him? The early fathers saw this as a prophecy of Christ's death and resurrection. He bows down. And then who shall rouse him? And so we see that the resurrection, which we're celebrating right now, in the season of Easter, is anticipated all the way in Genesis, the end. Isaiah says that God declares the end from the beginning, and that's what we see here with Jacob's prophecy. In the City of God, Augustine says this: I think it is enough to make the truth of this prophecy shine, to remark that the death of Christ is predicted by the word about his lying down, and not the necessity, but the voluntary character of his death in the title of lion. That power he himself proclaims in the gospel, saying, I have the power of laying down my life, and I have the power of taking it again. No man takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself, and I take it again. So the lion roared, so he fulfilled what he said. For to this power, what is added about the resurrection refers, who shall awake him? This means that no man but himself has raised him, who also said of his own body, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. You just find tons of commentary from the early fathers just elaborating on this at length, which is just great. They just saw Christ everywhere, and he is everywhere. It's not, as Jonathan Edwards says in that quote that I sent out this week, it's not just a fruitful imagination. It is a fruitful imagination, but it's a Holy Spirit's growing fruit and showing you the things in the Scripture about him. Road to Emmaus hermeneutic. Okay, then he talks about the scepter and the law and Shiloh and the obedience of the people. And so Judah, the man, he sins with his own sons, and particularly Tamar. He marries a Canaanite woman. He's withholding what is owed to Tamar. And the blessings on Judah recall some of these elements that happen. What did Judah do with Tamar as collateral? He gave her his scepter. He gave her his staff, his rule of authority. Here, take it. Just take it, which is what men continually do. Yeah, here's all my authority. Here's all my power. Just take it. I don't care. And he says of Judah, of this Messiah, that the scepter will not depart from him. And this is reference again to the kingship of Israel. That a king, there was always a king from Judah ruling at some point, from the time of David on at least. And I suppose the tricky part is the exile, but Daniel is likely from Judah. It says that he's taken from the royal family in Judah. So he's likely from Judah, and he exercises kind of a prophetic kingly function even in captivity, being a kind of vizier or consultant to the kings. And who's the first non-Judean king in Israel? He's an Idumean. He comes from Esau. Herod. Herod is the first one. So the scepter departs, not really, but it does in a sense. It doesn't depart in contrast to the prophecy here. But it goes to Christ. Christ was there. You have Herod and you have Christ. And Christ, the scepter goes to Christ. And this idea is something that are we good? Okay. This is a point, an apologetic point that you see with the early fathers against the Jews. They say, do you still have a Judean king ruling? No? Well, then Christ has come. Like, it's a very clear indication because they know that Jacob says that the scepter won't depart. So if they don't have a king from Judah, that means that it's somewhere. And it means that the Christians are right. So anyway, he says a lawgiver from between his feet will not. That's not going to depart either. It's an obscure phrase, but it's likely a euphemism for descendant. The lawgiver from between his feet. And then until Shiloh comes is also notoriously difficult. The word Shiloh there is not spelled exactly the same as the town. Town doesn't seem to have particular significance to what's being said here. And I think it can be better. I think it can be better translated into more of a phrase. That some of the translations say that until that which belongs to him comes. Or until tribute comes to him. I think that's probably a better rendering. That's how I take it. And this has dual fulfillment in the Solomonic period, where tribute is brought to Solomon, which also the word Shiloh kind of anticipates Shlomo, Solomon, and so there could be something there. So until that which belongs to him comes, so we know that everything belongs to him, and we know that everything is given to him, or at least the authority in the new covenant given to Christ. So I think that that's probably there. Which is anticipated with Solomon, who's, he has people bring tribute and treasure to him. Okay. Binding his donkey to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. This is essentially reference to both Jews and Gentiles being bound to Christ, being brought to Christ. Binding his donkey to the vine. Donkeys they're the mounts of chiefs in the Judges period. Jair's 30 sons rode 30 donkeys. Abdon has 30 sons and 40 grandsons who rode 70 donkeys, which anticipates the nations. And of course, Zechariah predicts Jesus riding on a donkey, the Messiah. And I think donkeys can signify unfaithful Israel. Saul went looking for his father's lost donkeys. And then they can also signify Gentiles. So in essence, it signifies anyone who has strayed from God. And essentially, the Messiah is going to bring both of them back. The king of Judah binds these lost donkeys to the vine. And the vine, Christ explicitly says, I am the vine, you are the branches. Wenham suggests that these phrases really just mean the wealth that Judah is going to accumulate, but I think it has ultimate fulfillment in Christ. All right, so Augustine says the donkey is Old Covenant Israel and is bound to the vine when John the Baptist preaches Christ to them, and that the donkey's colt is the Gentiles who come to Christ. St. Justin Martyr says the devils, hearing that the Messiah would ride on a donkey or a foal, they invented Bellerophon, who rode Pegasus the horse to heaven. So again, we see these imitations in the pagan world of Christ. And it says he washed his garments in wine and his clothes in the blood of grapes. Again, modern commentators just simply take this to be signs of wealth, which I think is true, but it's not merely that. And the early fathers saw in this the sacrifice of Christ and its application to us through the word and sacrament. The garments and clothes they took to be the church, because Jesus washes his church in his blood. So if he's washing his garments in his blood, he's washing the church. And the blood of grapes is, of course, a reference to the cup of blessing, which is in the Eucharist. Saint Hippolytus says, "In the blood of what grape then, but just his own flesh, which hung upon the tree like a cluster of grapes, from whose side also flowed two streams of blood and water, in which the nations are washed and purified, which nations he may be supposed to have as a robe about him." St. Justin Martyr, in his first apology, he says regarding, I think I mentioned this already last week or 2 weeks ago. He says, "The devils, accordingly, when they heard these prophetic words about the blood of grapes and the vine," it says, "The devils, when they heard these prophetic words, said that Bacchus was the son of Jupiter, and gave out that," and Jupiter's the head god, right, in the schema, and Bacchus is the son of Jupiter, and gave out that he was the discoverer of the vine. And they number wine, or the ass, among his mysteries. And they taught that having been torn in pieces, he ascended into heaven. So there you have it. His eyes are darker than wine and his teeth whiter than milk. I essentially take this to be ways of saying that the Messiah will see as a king and his words will be pure. It can be taken a lot of different ways, but that's generally how I would see it. Or we could even say that his people will see by the Spirit. This association with wine and the Spirit is strong throughout Scripture. So the people will see by the Spirit and, kind of drinking in that holiness, the Spirit of holiness. And that milk is for babes of God's people who aren't ready for solid food yet. And so Judah, who washed Joseph's garments in blood, is now promised to be the heir or the progenitor of the line of the Messiah, and the Messiah will then wash his own garments in his own blood, and his people in the blood of grapes. Judah, who offered himself as a substitute for Benjamin, will be the one from whom comes the Messiah, who will offer himself as our substitution in atonement for sins. Judah, who once gave away his ruling staff, will now be given a staff which doesn't depart. And the Lord of glory is prophesied here quite profoundly in the parting words of Jacob. Praise the Lord. Amen. The charge is this: bow down to your brother Judah. Let your life be prostrate before the lion's whelp. Bring your tribute and obedience to him, because he is your king, and his scepter will never depart. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.